wonderful guest for this morning, everyone. It is indeed Richard Wolstencroft. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm used to doing shows in the evening. What's going on here? It's like 12:30 in Melbourne. What time is it over in Perth?
It's 9:30 a.m. here.
9:30 a.m. Oh, very nice, very nice.
Yeah. So, Richard,
MUFF.
Yes, you founded MUFF in 2020. That's right, isn't it? I did hear that.
No, in 2000. 2000.
Sorry.
It's for 23 years.
That's right, 2000. Yeah. So
that's a little longer than 3 years. That's like you get less time for manslaughter. You get less time for manslaughter.
What was it that motivated you all those years? Because it's 23 years. That's a long time.
Sure is. It's half my life.
We might have audience members here that are only 20 years old. What motivated you to get that going back then, Richard?
Well, I've always been an independent filmmaker, probably since I was 10. So that's definitely a long time ago. That's the early 80s. So, I just made independent films. Obviously when I was a kid, I just did it for fun. And, I was also really quite into tennis. I was quite a good tennis player. I was ranked in Victoria when I was a teenager. But then I said, what do I want to do, tennis or film? So I decided to go the way of film, which is probably the wrong move, because there's no money in making movies, I'll tell you that much. I just, worked on my first feature called Marauders in 1986 when I was 16. And then I made my first feature, which I directed, called Bloodlust in 1991. That you can get on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, just look up Bloodlust. I think it's still on that platform, which is a lot of fun. And then after that, I made a film called Pearls Before Swine, because I used to run nightclubs in the 1990s. I ran a lot of nightclubs in Melbourne and Sydney. I was making good money doing that. I've always had to do some other kind of job to, get through, so to speak. And then I made a film called Pearls Before Swine, and that played at a lot of overseas film festivals, like one in Stockholm in Sweden, the Stockholm International Film Festival, one in Korea called the Puchon Film Festival, one in Mexico called the Ajijic Film Festival, and one in Spain called the Sitges Film Festival. So they played at all these overseas festivals, and I thought, well, it should play at a festival in Australia because it was shot in Melbourne. So I sent it to the Melbourne International Film Festival. I didn't expect them to put it on opening night, you know what I mean? But I thought maybe they'd sneak it in somewhere. But no, they weren't interested, and I don't know, it wasn't their kind of movie. It was too violent, and they've always not really particularly liked genre movies. Occasionally they might support one or two, like Romper Stomper or, Chopper. I think they're about the main two genre films that they'd supported in that 10-year period from 1990 to 2003 or something. And but really they liked stuff that was politically correct, that was funded by the government, that was, I guess the early version of woke, you know what I mean? Like woke is something slowly developed. Back then it was more kind of feminist stuff that had a light feminist kind of feel, historical dramas that were very safe, that pushed, say, an Aboriginal message or pushed a female message. This was the kind of stuff that was in The Piano. That was the kind of film, that sort of feminist with a respect for Indigenous cultures. That was the exact kind of film they liked, The Piano. And, so anyway, my film was not The Piano. It featured about 50 people getting killed in various horrible ways. And, it was kind of a violent film about a hitman. And so, I was sort of outraged at the time, and I wrote to an internet film zine called FilmNet. And I received email. I just said, look, I think my film's been unfairly rejected. Is there anyone else who has made an interesting kind of film that's a genre film, that's a horror film, that's a science fiction film? And I received about 50 emails from people. And I realized that was 50 movies. Some of them were shorts and some of them were features. So I just wrote back to everybody and said, you're all in. And one of the filmmakers, and I'm going to do a festival, it's going to be called the Melbourne Underground Film Festival. And every one of you is accepted. I don't even need to see the movie. You're all in. So one of the filmmakers that I wrote back to was James Wan, who made a film called Stygian. It was his first feature. He was a student in film at RMIT with Lee Winnell. The following year, they made a short called Saw, starring a friend of mine, Paul Moda. He was in it, and I think Lee Winnell was in it as well. And they took that to the funding bodies, Film Victoria, and they said, no, who's interested in a horror film where you got to saw someone's leg off? That's horrible. That hasn't got any Aborigines.
One of my most favourite movies.
Exactly. That doesn't have any transgender people. It doesn't have any gay themes. It's not a feminist movie. No, we don't want that.
No, you saw other body parts off.
They met up with a producer in Hollywood. They met up with a producer in Hollywood, and she thought the film was good, and she took it to, I think, New Line or one of these companies like that, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll give you $1 million to go make it." And Saw 1 came out, I think, around 2003, 2004, and it went on to. They've made 10 of them now. It's become the biggest horror franchise in the history of cinema, which is, I mean, bigger than Frankenstein, bigger than Dracula, bigger than Friday the 13th, bigger than Halloween. So, I mean, that's an incredible achievement. And obviously, the two creators are multimillionaires, and so is everybody else. So, Film Victoria turned down the biggest horror franchise in the history of the world. The world! That's what they do at Film Victoria. They fail upwards. Because every year the government comes along and gives them $50 million or $100 million. I don't know what their budget is. It's a lot of money. They give them all this money, and you know what they do every year? They waste it. They waste every single penny, and you know what they get back? Almost nothing. I'd say probably from that $100 million they're given, they probably make $1 million back, a couple of million back, which then they put back in their coffers, and they get another $100 million from the government the following year. Then they got $102 million to waste, and they spend it all on their friends. And it's incredibly corrupt as well. I mean, they give it to all their friends, who then give the people who work at these bodies kickbacks. For example, if your friend works at Film Victoria, I know how it works because they've all told me, right? Confidentially. So what they do is say I work at Film Victoria, and Robin, I really love your work. You make really great films about feminist, Aboriginal, transgender people. I think you're brilliant. Here's $2 million, and you say thank you, and you go and make your film for $500,000. You give me back, say, $200,000. I don't know how. You can give it, say, so I've got a cousin who's like a costume designer. Costumes was like $200,000, and there were no costumes. That's how it works. Yeah. They've all told me. I'm not everyone. They keep it secret.
Infuriating.
It's gigantic reward.
We know this happens.
Waste of taxpayer funded money, all spent on films that are never going to make money and never will. And so that's what the Melbourne Underground Film Festival is about. We're about standing up to this kind of bullshit. The majority of the films are made independently by people who just have their own money, who have $5,000, or I don't know, they worked a job, they save $5,000, they make a short, or you can make a feature for $5,000 if you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? You have a small cast. A film like Paul that involves. Go ahead.
You're the director of MUFF. So what does that entail? Can you tell people what does that mean by being director of MUFF? Tell people what you do.
Well, I mean, I guess it's like you're the CEO, you're the Elon Musk of SpaceX, or it's like you run Twitter. You know what I mean? It's your own little thing that you organize. So that's just, I mean, I used to run nightclubs, and I always ran them my way. I always felt it was a free speech absolutist, So, I mean, I've been in this struggle for free speech and free expression for a long, long time. Probably 30 years I've been running, over 30 years I've been running events in Melbourne every single year. And, every single year I've been sticking my finger up to, the status quo. And, I mean, in the 90s, it was really being provocative. And, like when I run nightclubs, being provocative was considered, people liked it. People liked it when you did something controversial, and some people didn't, might complain. But a lot of people, like, when you did controversial things in the 1990s, that your venue was packed. You'd have 500 people there because people were into culture that was against the status quo, and something really strange has happened the last 30 years where I guess it's really happened in the last 10, 12 years where people have become afraid of their neighbors. People have become afraid of the opinions of other people. So there's this insidious, it's almost like a social credit system that's voluntary, and that's the terrible thing. It's because we know that the government is thinking about bringing in a social credit system that will not be voluntary, that will be enforced by, people like fact checkers and government bodies or even AI, right? But there is a kind of voluntary one where people kind of like, like it's like, this person disagrees with the status quo on this issue. They're not acceptable. They're persona non grata. And it can happen over one comment. You've only got to make one comment. I'm somebody who's consistently upset people. And I mean, I'm proud of it, to be honest, because I think
at least you're consistent there. Well, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Richard. Given you've spent all of your life, as you said, started off at 10 making films, so to speak. Have you seen, I mean, obviously films have changed topics, the audience, those sorts of things. Has it been more significant in recent times that, things have been changing and moving? What have you noticed over all this time?
Yeah, look, as I said, I really noticed that in the 90s, being, contrarian, which I am, being, provocative, it was widely embraced. If you look back at even before times I was doing events, people who have inspired me, someone like Malcolm McLaren, who was involved in the punk movement, you know what I mean? Like he wasn't necessarily even into what the Sex Pistols were about, but he knew how to market it. You know what I mean? Like he knew how to make that offensive and how to get media attention. You've got to have a bit of a kind of Barnum and Bailey kind of showman quality. I think I have a little bit of that, and you've got to know how to play the media. I would do events at my nightclubs that I knew would cause, controversy. And, I would do the event and then, a couple of days later, it'd be on the front cover of the Herald Sun. The press was a bit easier to play because, there wasn't really any social media then. So whenever there was a controversy, it would happen through the newspapers. we would have celebrities come to my nightclubs. We had Kate Sobrano come to one of my clubs. That was on the front page of a newspaper and blah, blah, blah. We used to do crazy costume nights, that would upset people, about this and that. So, it was just, but to me, then that was considered cool, and that all the alternative culture, which included the gay community, all thought that was great. Yep. And I even think today a lot of the gay community like things that are alternative, whatever. They don't want everybody to be normal.
It's very depressing that, when I grew up, I was one of the alternative people, and it was cool back then, but I don't know. It really has changed now, where it's gone back to being taboo. It's step backwards. It's not cool anymore. You're a far right ideologist Nazi. It's a dirty word.
Exactly. So, and everybody is. You know what I mean? Like everybody is tarred. I mean, first of all, this accusation that somebody is a Nazi is completely nonsensical, because the Nazi Party ended in 1945, and there's no one alive from that period apart from maybe somebody who was 5 or 10 years old or 15 or something. So it's like the idea that people are still Nazis is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. There are no, and even if people are far right or extreme right or whatever you want to call it, they don't run around wearing swastikas or whatever. I mean, and there's occasionally small groups of what you might call neo-Nazis. Like, we saw a couple of them on the steps of Parliament. And, to me, those groups, I mean, are they... Either they're just really radical, they are radical, and they just don't know their optics. They don't know how they come across, or that they're, like Donald Trump accuses what happened on January 6th, that they're, agent provocateurs. An agent provocateur is somebody who, would put on a swastika and go down to, and really they work for the government. And they would go down to more redeeming and do a Nazi salute or whatever. And it would make people think, how Nazis support more redeeming, when Nazis don't support more redeeming, and more redeeming isn't a Nazi. But you know what I mean? It's like tarred with the same brush. It's a very, it's a tradition. And to everybody, I mean, even the word racist itself was invented by a far left radical, Trotsky. He came up with this idea that all left-wingers should call their opponents racists. And of course, he was murdered by Stalin because he had a falling out with Stalin, and he went to Mexico. He figured he was safe in Mexico, but Stalin sent an assassin down there and ice picked him in the brain. So that was the end of him. And he met a fitting end because the guy had murdered millions of people during the Bolshevik Revolution. It should be remembered that the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia murdered millions of people. It created the first concentration camps that were called gulags, well before the Nazis. The death toll for communism in the 20th century is 120 million plus. So like what happened with the Nazis was only a reaction, an extreme reaction, extreme kind of anti-communism. It was like there was this radical, murderous Bolshevik communism, right? And that created its opposite, which was kind of fascism and Nazism, right? And then they really fought it out in the middle of the 20th century, And
Yep.
I mean,
Yes,
to
it's the same
everyone,
with eugenics. People think that the Nazis were the creators of eugenics. Eugenics existed long before the Nazis and continued afterwards. I mean,
eugenics was
just
around
have
for
a
a
look
long
at
time.
Planned Parenthood.
And obviously, eugenics is still something that's popular with the global elite. I mean, someone like Bill Gates is constantly interested in eugenics, and I mean, the very fact that someone who's recommending the majority of the planet take his vaccine is also one of the world's greatest eugenicists. That should set off alarm bells in anyone's head. Anyway,
so Richard, you have made Melbourne Underground Film Festival a cash-only event. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we have. We've made it a cash-only event because we wanted to support the cash movement, and I think it's a good idea. Obviously, it's actually good to have online bookings and things, but we just thought, well, what the hell, we'll go this way, and just to encourage its use, because I think, I think the removal of cash from our society will be a huge negative, and it will create, obviously, where I mean, because obviously it's always convenient to use a card or whatever, tap, tap, tap,
Yeah.
I do it myself. Everyone does, right? But, you should always have cash. I always have, $100 or $200 cash on me just in case, you know what I mean? Like, just in case you need it.
Yeah.
And when you run low, you go get another $100 at the ATM or whatever, or at the bank. So, it's always good to have that option. And I don't know. I just don't feel that, every single, it's not only the fact that every single transaction you make will be monitored, is that, again, under the potentiality of a social credit system, when you say something online, like if you host Courage is the Cure, they might think, hang on, we don't like this show, we're going to turn off your cards, and then you can't buy food. And then suddenly Courage is the Cure has got to be, Daniel Andrews is going to be the Daniel Andrews show, or the Chinese Communist Party show. So, that's the threat of it, and that's why we have to resist it. And that's why I am resisting it.
I think it's great. So I've got the poster here for the schedule. That's really tiny and probably people won't be able to read it. But but people can go to muff.com.au and you can see.
Yeah,
you can
see
an
announcement to make today. It looks like we've lost one of the venues, which is really terrible. So cancel culture has struck. So the venue that's listed there, the warehouse space at 47 Edward Street, Brunswick Street, looks like it won't happen. I mean, really, I can't work out why that is. We've had an agreement in place for, over 6 weeks to do the event there. It's again, I don't think anyone has even contacted them. It's just some kind of panic to do with, the fact that the festival might be controversial, that I might be controversial. It operates as a kind of interior, I just really don't understand it. It's terrible. So at the moment, we need a venue for the first 3 days of the festival, which is, Friday, December 8th, Saturday the 9th, and Sunday the 10th. I imagine I'll be able to find one in the next few days, but this only really has sort of come to a head in the last 24 hours. I don't know why if they felt this way, they didn't, tell me 6 weeks ago when we first spoke about doing all this and made our agreements. I'm even considering legal action because I'm just sick of it. And I'm sick of this insidious, Yeah,
well, it's funny that when we make bookings,
I often, if the problem was me, I wouldn't come for the first 3 days. Just, I've got an assistant director, Ephesiia. She could do it. She's a great girl. She's a young, independent filmmaker. She's a feminist. She's nothing controversial about her. And I mean, she likes the freedom movement. That's about it. You know what I mean? But she would be fine. But it's like, it really is like, you're a communist in 1950s America or something, and they're like, oh no, we can't have anything to do with the communists. Oh my God, and it's
I think it's pretty awful behavior. When you cancel an appointment at a hairdresser or a dentist, they want to charge you fees. I mean, why is it okay for businesses who don't like someone's event, they're thinking whatever behind, just think it's completely reasonable to cancel. And it's the 29th of November. Hello?
Yeah, I know. It's 1 week out from the festival. But the other 2 venues are holding firm, the Purple Emerald and the Q Room out in Thomastown. We're doing our closing night there, which is the film Police State and the Great Awakening, which are, there you go. they're both kind of things that would be of interest. So please come along on closing night. That's at the Thomastown, 371 Settlement Road. Bring your cash. Tickets are $20.15. Come along. If we get 100, 200 people there, that will help support the festival on our closing night, which is Thursday, December 14. And look, I'm sure we will find another venue. So just check out our Facebook page, which just go join the Melbourne Underground Film Festival on Facebook. The address is there, or go to muff.com.au. I imagine by Friday, Saturday, we'll have a new venue. I mean, look, I've been speaking to the owners and the people, the second in command at this venue, trying to come to some other arrangement. But it always, it's so it's like some weird mental thing, and when they're into cancel culture, it's like a mental poison or something. You know what I mean? It's like they think they're advocating, Nazism or something. It's like, no, all the films are independent films. They're horror films. They're science fiction films. They're documentaries. They're on, many different topics. There's no advocating of ideas of the far right in any of the films I was playing at this venue. But it's just, there's no listening to reason. It is, as I said, like a voluntary social credit system, and it's everywhere, because this is not just happening to me. I mean, there's a really fascinating book. I think it's called "So You've Been Cancelled" or something like that, by John Ronson. He did a TED talk on cancel culture, and he just realized, he said that like cancel culture was really an insidious poison in society, and that there was a woman who, for example, she was like just some, she was had a normal job or whatever, and she was going to South Africa. And before she got on the plane, she posted on Twitter, "Gee, I'm going to Africa. I hope I don't get AIDS," right? And, she didn't really mean anything by that. It's not the greatest comment in the world. And she had 100 followers, right? But for some reason, one of her friends shared it, and then somebody who was really famous shared it. And anyway, the flight was 12 hours long, and by the time she landed, it had become the number one trending tweet on Twitter with 12 million shares, and she was now the world's most famous person, right? Who'd said this awful thing. And when she woke up, she'd lost her job, she'd been kicked out of the house she was renting, her whole life was destroyed in 12 hours. So that's how it works.
It's this cancel culture.
John Ronson said, "Is she racist?" She went back and he looked at her tweets, and she made silly, kind of what you call mom jokes. I'm going out in the shower. I hope I don't get wet. She would just say dumb things like that, or that were not funny, or she really didn't mean anything by this comment at all. But it basically destroyed her life. And
form of discrimination, because we can't discriminate against all of the other things that we used to. So, there still has to be that outlet, I guess. And so cancel culture is discrimination. People who have alternative views, being alternative is now the newest way to discriminate. And it's perfectly acceptable to treat people in that manner just because you have a different idea or different opinion.
Well, that's strange, because it's often from communities that have been bullied. I'm not going to say, for example, the gay community has not been bullied. It's definitely been a community that has been bullied. But the problem from a people that might have experienced bullying is that when given power, they might wish to bully themselves. I'm not accusing the gay community of that, because most people in the gay community I know are really nice people, and they're not into cancel culture, and they're supportive of people of different ideas, even those ideas that are not of their own. But there are some people that will go along with it, and obviously, particularly when there's a lot of money thrown into woke politics at the government level, funding grants. These are millions of dollars. People can get millions of dollars. There are a lot of people who, for example, are involved in the amount of money that's poured into, say, cinema grants for Aboriginal filmmakers. As far as I know, there aren't that many Aboriginal filmmakers in Australia. There's Warwick Thornton, and there's about another 2 or 3 whose names I know, but there's $50 million at least, probably at a state and federal level, poured into this. And I mean, it's mostly it's going to white people on the gravy train who, we love Aboriginal films. By the way, give us the money, and then we'll give $1 million to Aborigines, and we'll keep the rest. So it's an old trick. If you saw that film, Killers of the Flower Moon, which I thought was interesting, the new Martin Scorsese film, it's about how these white people came along and were pretending to help the Indians. who owned land with a lot of oil on it, but really they just wanted to financially exploit them. And I thought that was actually a very interesting film about the woke people of today who pretend to be friends of minorities when all they wish for them is actually to financially exploit them and essentially, do away with them. Which is what that film is about. So even though the film is 3.5 hours long, and it's a pretty grim film. It's not a particularly happy movie, but I thought it was interesting. Had an interesting political message.
Yeah, I did some research about different agencies and institutions in America that are, that have to do with the LGBT groups, and just looking at their financial statements over the past just 6 years, it's astounding. What they had 6 years ago and what they get now from donations and other philanthropy, all these sorts of things. It's really a money-making enterprise, that's for sure, and people taking advantage of them. What do you think about the future, Richard, of films, given all the endless string of agendas that we have now? We've just talked about cancel culture, wokeness, all this sort of stuff. Where do you see the future of film?
Well, people don't like to see films that are made by a committee. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the things that people don't understand at the Australian film bodies, that are basically, you got to remember, when you make a film, in Australia, you have to submit it. So that's your script. You submit it to, a funding body that's a committee, and everybody on that committee has never made a film. And if they have made a film, it's a failure. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the committee. You know what I mean? Like, so these are people who have no idea what they're doing and have terrible taste in cinema, and are basically, many of them are on the kind of wages like $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year. This is the wages that the government pays these funding body people, and they've never made a film. And I know established filmmakers. Richard Lowenstein don't make that kind of money. They make $200,000 a year from making independent films. You know what I mean? So all the money just goes to this professional bureaucratic class, and it's like it's like a kind of like a lower court, and you've got to ingratiate yourself with it. You've got to kiss the ring. Oh, yes, please, and to be given a grant that essentially over, say, 4 years, they might give you $200,000, but you've got to live on it for 3 or 4 years. So it's basically just like getting a dole, but for artists. To me, it's insulting. The funding body should act like producers. They should go out to film festivals, including the Melbourne, and look for talent. And if they did look for talent, they would have found James Wan, who would have made Saw here, and the biggest horror franchise in history would be made here. They would have discovered Scott Ryan, 15 years before he made Mr. In Between, which became the best Australian TV show the last 20 years. They would have discovered Patrick Hughes 10 years before he made The Expendables. So, it's just on and on and on. There's a list of great talent, and these are just the more famous examples. There's a lot of, younger talent that still is yet to, be discovered. Some of it has been discovered, like Zach Hilditch. We played his first film. Stuart Simpson, he's getting some attention now. I mean, there's a lot of great filmmakers that are getting attention, and we just like to support them. That's always what we've been about. We certainly are not about my controversy. I mean, I personally don't know what the fuck does it make. What I believe, who cares? Like, I don't care about the politics of the guy who runs the Sydney International Film or the Melbourne International Film Festival, or the woman. I don't care, but I know what their politics is. I'll tell you right now, it's woke left, and and they don't even really necessarily believe it. It's just that they know that has to be their politics if they have that job. Because if it was anything else, if one of them would have come out and say, you know what, I don't mind Donald Trump, goodbye, like the next day. So it's just extraordinary. It's extraordinary, and it is a kind of totalitarianism of thought, and it's so prevalent. It's like the air we breathe, and it's just most disturbing.
Yeah, it is. It is, yeah. Yeah, I know certainly a lot of people that I'm speaking to, because they I guess they were moviegoers. They're saying that people aren't even going to the cinemas anymore, to watch all
there's no doubt
films,
There's no doubt the streaming services are having a big effect. I mean, these things like Netflix, they're a bit like, obviously when Amazon happened, it was a huge, like it was a big assault on bookshops. Many bookshops closed because people would just order books, from Amazon. It was originally set up, Amazon, as a place to sell books. He was actually a bookseller who became one of the world's richest men. Netflix has had a deleterious effect upon cinema itself, but cinema still survives. I went and saw the new Napoleon film. you know, a really big film, an epic on a big screen. Nothing beats that still. So I think cinema will survive, but it's going to survive in a wounded manner. And that a lot of people are going to consume their films and media through Netflix. And I mean, you know, I don't necessarily knock Netflix. I have Netflix at home, and there are some good films on there. You know, I think they do documentaries well. They do crime stuff well, things about crime. You know, there's some interesting stuff there on that platform, and I watch it every now and then. I mean, there is some woke stuff as well, you know, and some terrible stuff they play sometimes, but it's only one of the many things they play. And, you know, you can, if you don't like it, you just ignore it. Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, if they want to play rubbish like that, they can do it, I suppose. But, like, you know, you got to wonder why. But they don't play Sound of Silence. What was that? Sorry, Sound of Freedom. You know? Sound of Freedom,
that's right. Richard, I'll put the poster up again so people can go to muff.com.au to get tickets and see the program schedule there. Is there something else?
Just for the first 3 days that this venue at the moment is up in the air. So we'll probably have to announce a new venue in the next 24 hours, 48 hours. So if anyone does know a new venue, you know, that might be in that area, to get in contact with you, and you can pass on the email to me, that would be great. I have a few other friends, obviously, I'm talking to as well. So I imagine we'll continue on and fight on. But, you know, this cancel culture is alive and well, and it's just a constant struggle doing these kind of events, but, you know, we keep doing them. So there it is.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm super happy you could join me this morning, Richard. And
thank you, Robin.
Yeah, I hope yeah, oh no. And fingers crossed you get a venue very soon. Yeah.
I'm sure we will. And if there's anybody out there in the freedom movement now who you know, gets upset by this kind of thing and has a warehouse or something like that we could use, drop Robin an email or send me an email to info@muff.com.au, info@muff.com.au if someone wants to get in contact with me. And there you go. Thank you for having me on to support the festival, and it's great to discuss these important issues. And you know, obviously, this is only just, you know, one of the other battles in the culture war. And you know, I think it's great, the show that Michael is doing on culture, because I think, you know, this is you know, what comes after the pandemic, building another, you know, culture, another society outside of art and stuff to take us forward into our next battles. There it is.
100%. Right, so we're going to go out, everybody, with, we know that I'm a huge fan of Taste the Biscuit, but I found someone lip syncing to it, and I know everyone's going to cringe, but it brings me great joy, and we need things that make us giggle, otherwise we'll go insane in this upside down world. So I'm going to play this, and again, you're welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, and thanks, Richard. You're amazing as always.
Thank you, Robin.
Taste the biscuit, taste the goodness of the biscuit. Taste the honey sauce, taste the goodness of the biscuit with the honey sauce. Don't get that honey sauce on me, I don't like the way it tastes with my chicken wings.